we're gonna do we're talking, so and he had the I3s, he would go, we're talking, and then we're talking, we're talking, we're talking. So you're gonna do that part, right? Cool. And in legalize it, it's super easy. I just need you to repeat there to me. I'm gonna go legalize it, and then you go legalize it, and I'll do it again, legalize it, and then I'll go again, legalize it. So that's almost too easy, isn't it?
To see the unification of all
ganja ones, oh yes. As it's been said already, let it be done. We are the children of the ganja one, oh yes. We are the children of the higher one, oh yes. On ganja unite now, for the children they won't come home, yeah, yeah, yes. On ganja unite now, cause we're moving right out of Babylon, and we're grooving towards our parents' land, oh yeah. How good and how pleasant it would be before God and human to see the unification of all ganja ones, oh yes. As it's been said already, let it be done. We'll tell them who we are under the sun, oh yes. We are the children of the ganja one, oh yes. We are the children of the higher one, oh yes. All ganja unite now, all ganja unite now. Unite for the benefit of your people. Unite for it's later than you think. Unite for the benefit of your children. Unite for it's later than you think. All ganja await its creator. All ganja await its creator. Oh ganja, you're my foreparents' cornerstone. Unite for the ganjas a yard. Unite for the ganjas abroad. All ganja unite now. All ganja unite now. Cause we're moving right out of Babylon, and we're moving towards our parents' land. You know that tomorrow is Bob Marley's birthday?
Wow!
Yes! So that's 2 great days in a row. Today here at the Cannabis Convention and tomorrow for Bob Marley's birthday. And so I'm pleased to tell you that next Sunday on the 12th, we're doing a Bob Marley evening at the Jamaican Jerk House downtown, in between the 8th Channel and Government there on Pandora. So I'm going to be doing 2 sets of Bob in between 9 and 11 next Sunday on the 12th, so I hope you'll be there too.
All right.
So please sing We're Talking with Me. Oh yeah! Alright, we're talking. I want to talk it with you. We're talking, we're talking, we're talking. And I hope you like talking too. There's no rules in your vows. You can do it anyhow. I will see you through. Cause every day we pay the price. We're the living sacrifice. We'll talk until the talking's through. Oh yeah, we're talking. To think that talking was a thing of the past. We're talking, and I hope this talking's gonna last. No bad laws can stop us now. To beg, no, we won't bow. Neither can be bought nor sold. We'll defend our rights as our children must unite. Our life is worth much more than gold. Oh yeah, we're talking.
That way, whenever
We're
they do want to
talking in
speak,
the
you'll
name
be
of the Lord, the Holy Herb, yes. We're talking.
Is that one local now?
We're talking right straight from your
in rules of creation here where we're talking about Chihuahua. We're talking about Chihuahua. I wanna talk it with you. We're talking. The tokens on your token too. Channels are that try, the truth that cannot hide, to keep you satisfied. True love I know exists, is the love I can't resist. Talk by my side. Oh yeah, we're talking. I wanna talk it with you, then we go fast. We're talking. Hope you like talking too. We're talking. I wanna talk it with you, yeah. We're talking. And I hope you like talking too. I'll tell you, it's better than alcohol, it's better than drugs, it's better than pharmaceutical drugs, it's better than anything. Yeah, it's the holy herb. We're talking. Legalize it after me, the chorus, please. And as I've learned through my 12 years of activism in the marijuana world, it's the best medicine, it's the best food, it's the best clothing, it's the best lodging, it's the best fuel, it's the holy herb, really. All thoughts are very strong, the only thing that's wrong, it's that prohibition and all its oppression. Legalize it. Legalize it. Legalize it. Legalize it. As we heal and live, 'cause ganja is medicinal. List of 10,000 herbs, plants of all the lands. Ganja's no side effect, medically perfect. Legalize it. Legalize it. Thank you. Legalize it. Legalize it. As we taste the bud, 'cause ganja, fantastic cooking. As for our diet, on ganja we can bet. Ganja is delicious, its oil is nutritious. Legalize it.
Legalize it.
Legalize it.
Legalize it.
As we dress and wear, 'cause ganja is the best clothing. Ganja's strongest fiber will keep you through weather. Ganja is warm and dry as many years go by. Legalize it. Legalize it. Legalize it. As we see and know that ganja is so natural, canvas also being a wonderful lodging, said to be waterproof, ganja will be your roof. Legalize it. Legalize it. As we smoke and eat such ganja illumination, yes, spiritually, ganja does set us free, enlightens consciousness, bring peace and awareness. Legalize it.
Legalize it.
Legalize it.
Legalize it.
As we are aware that ganja, divine creation, right from the beginning, ganja has always been. Ganja is most ancient, yet still so relevant. On every continent, ganja is dominant, rooted in all culture, past, present, and future. Legalize it.
Legalize it.
Legalize it.
Legalize it.
Thank you very much, John. It's always a pleasure to have you open our conventions. Welcome everyone to the 7th Annual Convention of the International Hempology 101 Society. So as you can see, we're just getting started for 4 or 5 hours of, at times, what could be pretty intense dialogue, and at other times, hopefully, very entertaining as well. I'll just give you a brief description of things in a moment. But before I go further, I'd like to invite, what's your last name? Adrian Letourneau, the president of the UVic Student Society, to welcome you here onto the campus today. Thanks, Adrian.
All right, well, I'm president of 420. 420 started 7.5 years ago. Yeah, and now we've got over 250 members, right? It's like the biggest club on campus.
Yay!
Since that time, thanks to 420, we as students have learned about statistics, the economics, and the scientific breakthroughs of marijuana. Thanks to Ted and his unerring legacy, I could talk to you for hours about statistics, what Statistics Canada says. 3¼ drug crimes involve marijuana. 72% for possession. 9% of adult court cases are drug related on these charges. But I mean, you already know about that. I can talk about the economics and the massive untapped income that goes into the hardcore driving lords, not to mention the possible tourist industry. But we know about that already too. I can talk about the scientific breakthroughs, countless tests done on loose rats and a variety of other animals to support our claims. But we all know that already. We wouldn't be here if we didn't believe in our convictions. And now with 420, we're reaching out to the students, our resources of the future, because they're going to be our economists, our politicians, our philosophers, our psychologists, our doctors, our artists. And we want to tell them that we live in a community where all the information that we're talking about is available. It's in the libraries, it's on the internet, and it's out of the mouths of our political representatives and our activists who have innumerable good reasons to believe in what they're fighting for. And most importantly, that we want to tell them that this isn't just about a plan. This is about personal freedom. And that's it. Please enjoy the 7th Annual Convention.
Thank you very much, Adrian. I guess a couple things about the society, and then I'll tell you what we're doing today, and then we'll get on with the speakers. The International Hempology 101 Society has been incorporated now for 10 years, although in some ways hempology has certainly been operating for longer than that. It began in Vancouver, where I first went to some meetings and decided to move to Victoria 10.5 years ago. I quickly started a club here on campus to help educate people about hemp, marijuana, and prohibition. Shortly after starting hempology, though, I got, you could say, a little sidetracked providing services to people with permanent physical incurable diseases and disabilities. And that is through the Cannabis Buyers Club of Canada. And you'll probably hear about our group. Actually, May, the first speaker, is a member and works with us. And throughout the day, you'll hear about our organization. We have a storefront downtown on Johnson Street. In fact, the oldest club in Canada, we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary of selling medical cannabis here in Victoria. And looking forward to doing that for many years, because unfortunately it doesn't seem the government's going to do its job. But today we are here to talk not just about our club and what we've been doing and have done here in Victoria, but today we've tried to gather activists from around the West Coast who have been very involved in this movement. Most of the people you're going to hear from today have been fighting against this law for over a decade, some much longer, some might be more recent, but new energy is always needed and appreciated. And so you're going to hear today some, at times, emotional stories. I'll admit it would be very hard not to cry throughout Renee Bourget's talk. And so expect some very emotional moments. If you don't know, Renee is expected to turn herself in to the authorities by the end of the month and go to jail in the United States for a very long time. You hear about why and the circumstances. She's a very brave woman and very honored to have her here. As well, Mark Emery's story is a very sad story in some ways, although the way he'll talk about it today will probably be not so sad, but in many ways it is a tragedy what is going on there as well. Hopefully, though, it will not be all sad and bad news today. There will hopefully be some encouraging stories, and at the same time, at the end of the day, we're going to have fun, whether we're in a war or not. You may have heard of our game show, Reach for the Pot. It's never been played on campus here before. I understand that Mark Emery and Chris Bennett, Renee Bourget's husband, and others are going to play against some staff and members of Hempology. That will happen after 4:20, so we'll be talking here until that time, and then we'll take a brief recess after 4:20, and then come back and play the game show. So I hope you're able to sit back and enjoy as much as you can today. I hope you can learn a lot, because these people have a lot to say, not necessarily facts and statistics, but they have a lot to say about how one can and should lead their life, to live a moral life, to live a good life, one where you're not only making your own personal life better, but the lives of others around you. Everyone here today has dedicated themselves to doing that. And with that, I'd like to invite our first speaker, Renee Bushby, to come down and talk about some of her struggles, some of her highlights, and I'm sure there'll be the odd word of inspiration mixed up in between. So please, if everyone could give a hand.
About 1968, and that small voice has been able to now expand and yell, "Ja Rastafari." That little voice did not know anything about medication. Medication in terms of herbs, in terms of smoking and doing all sorts of things with pipes and all sorts of things. I had no idea about stuff like that. Before then, seeing that I was born in 1968, before then, there were people that fought for this plant. People that enjoyed this plant. People that became free with the plant. And as I was growing and getting older, there were car crashes because the police was running after a van of somebody who is carrying marijuana from one city into the other. Big car crashes. And my thinking at the time was, what is this plant and why is it so wanted by almost everyone? What is about this plant? And I never really got an answer other than the fact that the people who smoked it would act paranoid and they would climb poles of electricity, almost reaching the danger zone up there and running around with red eyes and all sorts of things. And my thinking became a little bit more intensified in thinking really what is involved in this plant. I just happen to be a person living with AIDS. There's a big difference between living with HIV and living with AIDS. When you're living with AIDS, you're near the end of the line, and I'm not looking for sympathy, please. You're near the end of the line, and your life could be cut short by a sudden illness at any time. But the good old Rastafari sort of takes care of me and makes sure that I'm doing just fine. The first toke that I ever took of marijuana was in 1996. Maybe 2 or 3 days before I flew to Canada. I was 28 years old. And the man that brought marijuana to my place was a teacher of mine. He taught me when I was equivalent of grade 10. And I loved my teacher. I had a crush on my teacher. I had a crush on many of my teachers, even the ladies. It's amazing. And I wrote Mr. Oshino and I said, Mr. Oshino, I'm leaving the country. I would like to see you before I leave. And that's what he brought, was a little nugget. I don't remember whether we smoked it through the pipe or we smoked it through like smoking. I don't know, but we smoked and I fell asleep. He told me, be very careful, because the first time I smoked, talking of himself, I ran like crazy everywhere, just running, Forrest Gump and everything. And he was able to guide me through this initiation thing of smoking for the first time. And I did fall asleep. I was tired for 28 years, battling physical abuse, battling sexual abuse, battling verbal abuse, fighting really hard, and I never had a rest. And that day, I did have a rest. And I remember after sleeping, waking up and wondering where did Mr. Oshino go, and running like a mad woman all the way to the bus stop, looking for him, and I said to him, thank you so very much, because I do feel completely relaxed and really energized and ready to take this journey into Canada. So when I got here, I was in UBC. It was very quiet. My mind could not comprehend because the chicken and the goats and the donkeys and all the other things were making noise in my head. The noise came with me. It doesn't matter how geographically move, what a geographical move you make from one place to another, your madness goes with you. Hi, Dan. Hi, Dan. Just checking that it's you. Good. So, I couldn't believe the quiet that was in UBC. And I was thinking, this cannot be. This really cannot be that you can touch silence. And I started to knock off the madness by reading the number plates of every BC car. Beautiful British Columbia. The first one I saw, I was like, oh wow, that's cool, man. And then it was a series. Every car in BC that belongs to BC says, beautiful So I started to, in my head, see the beauty in the country. I was in Vancouver for 5 days, thanks be to Allah, because you could get lost there in the east side. It's possible to get lost there. I got lost in the streets of Nairobi. And Vancouver, for black ass walking around Vancouver, it's easy to get in trouble. Believe me. Believe me, it's true. And so I was in Shawnee Lake for a little while, very quiet also, very serene, and I was wondering, wow, this place, wow, I have arrived, this is incredible. Then the snow of 1996 hit, and I thought, my Lord, I need new shoes, because I had to walk in the snow with shoes with holes on them, and I'm not the only one who wears shoes with holes on them. Ted is known for wearing shoes with holes in them. But during the snow, it's really hard, so I put polythene paper and started living Canadian. Going to the shops to look for milk, and there's no milk because everybody wants milk, and everybody wants eggs, and everybody wants everything that there isn't. And I started to think, wow, we can be reduced into poverty just like that. It doesn't matter where we are and what we are doing. And so my experience was very, very hard. I'm still sick with HIV, with AIDS at this time. Viral load is high to the millions. Not really, I'm exaggerating, 780,000. But that's almost a million. A million of blood, that much virus inside the body. And the fighter cells that are supposed to be between 400 and 1,500 were now at 80. And I'm still thinking, I have no coverage. Good thing the Kool-Aid, the Swift Street Clinic downtown is trying to help me, but they can't really give me medication because of my migration status, and a lot of things were going wrong. I decided to join a community organization known as the AIDS Vancouver Island. And it's while there that a man came. I always thought it was Ted, but he says he's not the one. But there was a guy that came and talked to us about marijuana and how it can help the immune system so that you're eating food, you have the munchies, and you're just eating and eating and eating. And your body's getting better and better and better all the time. I didn't know how to approach this because in my country, Kenya, it's a big criminal offense, huge criminal offense, like they're doing to Renee. It's as bad as that when you're caught with marijuana. So I was thinking, I need this medication. I'm a logical woman. I know I need to smoke this thing. I wasn't very concerned about the eating of it, but smoke, it's cool. It's very cool. I was thinking, I need to be able to smoke this. So my friend Rob, small Rob, he walked me into Ted's apartment. And I was thinking, my God, he lives up there where he sleeps. There's a loft. I've never seen a loft before. So I'm thinking, this guy sleeps up there. He's a kid coming down those ladders. He must be something else. And people were having conversations beyond anything I've ever had before. They were philosophizing. Yeah. And somehow I got registered as member number 26. I hope never to lose my card to the cops or anybody else for that matter. And I began this fight for first myself. I had to really understand, what does this medicine do to me in my head? First of all, it made me feel really small. And I was getting smaller and smaller. And my friend Andreza, who was working with me, was getting smaller too. And I thought, it must be that powerful if it can make me this small. And then I thought, what's it going to do to my head? Because my head has bipolar, they call. And so with bipolar, you get really, really high or you get really, really low. And I was trying to figure out, how can I be able to take this medication to help my AIDS, but not to interfere with my HIV. It was very critical thinking that I had to do. Because you see, I liked the feeling of being high on a sativa. I loved that feeling. And that's why I say, let's legalize this plant, not just for people who are medically sick, but also for the people who enjoy the high. Come on. I mean, we should be able to be able to do that. But first of all, let's take care of the sick people. So I was invited by AIDS Vancouver Island to come to UBC at the SAG with a table about HIV and AIDS. And everybody walking around seemed like you seem today, like from somewhere else, you know, shining and just incredibly radiating energy. And that's what I felt in the halls of the SAB that night, that day. I think it was during the day. And the people were talking and philosophizing, and all sorts of things were written in pencil on the boards that were hanging. Just an unimaginable amount of creativity was coming out of the whole thing. And I decided, well, bipolar or no bipolar, I'm smoking this out. I'm smoking it, and I'm going to go through it, through the depths of hell with it, and see how I emerge on the other side. And how I emerge is Mina Kamau Bushby, married to Ryan Bushby, who is working the cameras over there. This man smokes the herb, and he overlooked, or maybe did not overlook, but considered my HIV and my bipolar status, and decided, I'm giving her a ring. And then I'm giving her another ring. She has 2 rings. It's just incredible how the plant has been able to help me as a person. And the many difficult situations I've had to go through, say, writing to my brothers, I'm working at this club, it's about, don't tell anybody. And my dad writing the same story, my mom writing the same story, because it's huge to be involved with the marijuana. Now they were thinking, she left us, she went there, she's sick, and now she's doing marijuana. Oh my goodness, she's lost. My parents were able to fly over for their wedding, thanks to tremendous amount of community getting together and deciding if that's what she wants is her parents there, then her parents are going to be there. And they were there. So after the honeymoon, in which I will go through the details, Ryan hands me a joint in front of my dad. And I'm shaking. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is my dad, this is a joint, this is Ryan, what do I do? And my dad says, Bushia. Bushia means, and I lit that joint and I was free. Free because my mom and my dad were standing there looking at me, pulling. And that freedom is what has given me the ability to be able to say, let us not live on our knees anymore. We have prayed enough. Now we shall live on our feet. We shall use our brain. We shall use everything that it takes that is within us to combine our energies together and have this deportation of people like Kube. And this Renee case that is so frustrating. I wore the black thing we were supposed to wear for days, just thinking, oh please, somebody do something about it. So we're going to move forward. We're not going to look backwards. We're going to continue talking, and we're going to continue talking. Jairus Pafarai.
Thank you very much, Renee. So there's a slight change of scheduling here. I had thought to have Michelle Rainey speak next. Michelle is the Vice President of the BC Marijuana Party. and essentially, in many ways, I think the right hand of Mark Emery. Unfortunately, Mark Emery and crew have not arrived yet. They should be here, ferries and light, so we've switched our tentative schedule a little bit to bring up our speakers from the Green Cross in Seattle. Now, before I have them come up here, I'd just like to say a few words about Joanna and Stitch. You may have heard their story last year at Molson College. In fact, last year we were so impressed with not just their words, but their demeanor, their personalities, that we've actually decided that we're going to try and have them come to every convention as long as possible, and keep that close personal connection and keep hearing updates from the United States. Some of us are not allowed down in there, so we won't be able to come and visit you. And this is in many ways the closest we'll get to what is happening down there. And Joanna and Stitch, just in personal history, have been fighting probably 15, 20 years? 15, okay. I think in an organized club way for slightly over 10, but certainly we have two veterans of the war in the United States, two surviving veterans, which is, I think, fairly rare. And so I'd just like to thank them for coming up here and thank them for all the work that they've done down in the United States to clean that up in the monsters. Thank you very much.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Joanna McKee, and we've been working, my partner and myself have been working in the medical marijuana movement, like Ted said, for about 15 years. In the early 90s, I was living in Fairbanks, Alaska, and there was a recriminalization petition going on.
Sorry folks, the technology isn't going to work. I'll just check this.
In any event, Stitch and I met. Okay, thank you. Stitch and I met in the early 90s in Fairbanks, Alaska. I was on my way moving to Seattle, and there was a recriminalization movement up in Alaska. So Stitch came up from LA and helped, and he and I met at the time, and I was on my way to Seattle, and he talked me into going to LA, and I went down there, and I had been in Alaska. I had worked on the Raven decision back in '74, which originally decriminalized marijuana for personal use. And when I brought up in a court case in '87 that I was using it for medical purposes, the district attorney said, "Medical purposes? What do you mean marijuana for medical purposes? I've never heard of such a thing." This was '87, so you can think how far we've come in the last 19 years. In any event, when I went down to LA, all of a sudden, I wasn't the only one that was talking about marijuana used for medical purposes. I was hit by a car in the early 80s, and I was in a coma for a week. And I had epileptic seizures from that. I had back problems. I had discs moved in my back and such. So I was a patient, although I didn't realize it. And then we came on down to LA, and we worked with some of the other people there, got involved in the medical marijuana movement, and then we moved back to Seattle. And when we got to Seattle, I was looking for medicine. And at the time, we couldn't find anything that was dry enough to smoke. So we got to hearing on television about the people in Washington, D.C. had a medical marijuana co-op, and I'm going, my goodness, can we actually do that? When I had my accident, I was disabled. I was put on Social Security. And I thought at the time that I had nothing left to live for. But because of my use of medical marijuana, I began to feel that I could tolerate the problems that my disabilities had caused me. And so marijuana in effect saved my life because it gave me a way of dealing with my medical problems. I had back problems, and if you take a lot of pain medications, if you take enough to give you the relief that you need to live, you wind up being in another place in your head. And I found out that I could use marijuana to help with my pain, and it didn't zonk me out for hours like the pills did at times. So Stitch and I went to Seattle, couldn't find any medicine for ourselves to use, and so we started talking to people, started hearing about the medical co-ops that had been started in other states, and it was kind of I can't live, I can't be functional without the right to use my medicine. And if I use it for myself and I meet somebody who's sicker than I am, I have a moral duty to help them. And so telling me, all right, you can have medicine for yourself if it helps you, but you can't give it to anybody else, didn't make any sense. So we went, got involved with the AIDS hotline because there were a lot of AIDS patients who needed the medicine, and we got involved with the AIDS hotline and started helping other patients, started growing it for ourselves and helping other people. And then in 95, when we got busted in 96.
So we were busted May 3rd, 1994. The case wasn't out of the appeal court until, sometime in 97. We went out on a sealed decision on a warrant.
The thing was that
That's not the usual.
they had decided to make an example of us. Well, sometimes when the police decide to do that, it sort of turns on them because they wind up making such an example of us that the people realize that maybe we're not wrong in the first place. Maybe we're not the problem in this situation. And we started going, I felt that if I could have medicine for myself and I could give it to somebody else who needed it much worse than I did. See, I grew up in the 50s, back when America was still a free country. And I thought we had the right to take care of ourselves, and I mean, there's nothing in the Constitution about this, about the government having the right to hassle people for what kind of medicine they use. And so, I kind of felt that, like I said, I was still under the impression that we lived in a free country. So I had the impression that the thing to do is to go to the courts, go to the legislature, go to the government, and once they understand what a terrible mistake they've made, surely they're going to jump on the bandwagon and say, oh, we're so sorry, we've been so mistaken about medical marijuana for years. Well, that's not exactly what happened, but like I said, that was back when I thought I grew up in a free country, and I understand that the Canadian perspective, European perspective, a lot of the world perspective doesn't agree with America being a free country anymore. But then again, everybody else is wrong except our president, as you know. In any event, little by little, the media, when you have a medical marijuana issue, our lawyer told us when we first got arrested, he said, normally I tell people not to talk to the press. He said, but to be honest, you have no leg to stand on other than making people understand what the problem, what the situation is, and why you're using the marijuana, and why you're giving it to other people. And so I would encourage anybody who has a problem to get involved with the press, because most of the people who are reading the press and understand what's going on will be far more likely, because they know that there are times in their lives, or no matter whether you're Republican or Democrat, you still have relatives, you still have family who get sick, and there is a point you reach with people for patients. I've talked to the district attorney in one of our cities in Seattle, in Washington, and he said that his cousin or aunt or somebody had breast cancer, and I said, did you ever reach the point where you don't care whether it breaks the law or not? Somebody's got to do something to help this person through this period of time. And he said, yeah. And I said, then you understand, when you reach that point, you realize that it doesn't matter if somebody wrote down on a piece of paper that says it's against the law. This is a person's life you're dealing with, and you need to help them. And when you can't find anything else that works except medical marijuana, what else can a decent moral person do but to help the person who needs the medicine? And as we have gone over the past years, we had a co-op set up in Seattle, and in the early 2001, I had to have some surgery. I had knee surgery, and I also had neck surgery. In any event, and so we had been working with the co-op for about 10 years, and we had met some people who had worked with us and such, and they wanted to start a co-op in another city. And I said, well, listen, I'm going to have surgery. I'm going to be out of it for a couple of years. I said, why don't you just go ahead and continue with the co-op that we had? And they did. We turned it over to them, and we didn't charge them or anything like that. We just turned it over to them, except for the medicine we had that belonged to people. And so that worked fine for a couple of years, and then it no longer worked. There were the people we had turned it over to, one of them had left, and they the other person had told us that it was we started it out as a mission to get patients the medicine they need to survive. The person told us, no, it's not a mission, it's a business, and you handle it like a business. So I had asked them to quit using the name Green Cross because we always had for patients who couldn't afford to do a donation for the medicine, we always had medicine for people who needed the medicine. That was what came first. And after a while, the people we had turned it over to quit doing that and quit remembering that the patients were the ones that need the help. And so, like I said, we had sort of backed off, and we had done the political and the legal work, and other people had helped the patients. And all of a sudden, the patients came to one person to us and said, how do we get rid of this person who's running the co-op and doing horrible things? And so there was, it's a co-op, which you guys, the person who had taken it over thought it was their co-op, and we told them, oh, it's a co-op, so it means it belongs to everybody. And marvelous to hear, about 3 months ago, they voted her out, and the day they voted her out, they changed the locks in the co-op so that you couldn't interfere with them anymore, and now it's running like a patient group should be. Now, of course, as we all know, when you have a committee of 5 or 10 people running something, getting everybody to work together sometimes is a problem. And so they're kind of going through that situation now. But the nice thing to see was that the group that we started eventually wound up taking over for themselves, taking care of themselves, and are now running the co-op themselves the way we had always wanted them to do. The way we wanted to be when we started out. And we still help legally. We do interviews, we go to the legislature, we go to the political people and things like that. And we still help the patients be protected because now in Seattle there are 3 or 4 co-ops. When our Supreme Court, I don't know if you people heard about the ruling last June in the Supreme Court about medical marijuana, what they didn't tell you is the judge had written and said that, I think erroneously, that the Commerce laws, the way our Constitution is set up, they can't deal with medical marijuana. But the judge said that therefore it falls back onto each state and the state legislatures that have the medical necessity defense. And it also goes to the people to talk to the legislature and have them make it legal for patients to have medicine. But the thing is that even if you might have heard about the ruling back in June, may not be as bad as we thought it was because we still have the medical necessity defense in the states. And we're continuing to come and help people and get more clubs started and get more people involved with this. And that's about all I do. That's it.
That'll get in the way, and we'll make this an It may have asked you that question. But anyway, that way I purposely misspelled it so I can find myself and separate myself from everybody else. I've even met a few stitches. There's a cartoon series on them with that name. They all spell it C on the T. But anyway, aside the point. On the Supreme Court ruling, we were given a gift that was very wonderful. Up until then, there was no medical necessity defense for medical marijuana under federal law. The Supreme Court asked that we bring another court case before them on the grounds of medical necessity, because the first one was arguing that it wasn't interstate commerce to take your marijuana from your basement up to your living room bedroom. And we thought we had a case there, but turns out that's still interstate commerce. I don't understand why. It's a loophole. Our Constitution says everything not in the Constitution is the full right of the state and only the state. But the Commerce Clause is in there, and like any program, schedule, or anything, they all got back doors. And they get around their right to control marijuana and everything else through this commerce decision. It's commerce right that the federal government has ruling over everything through commerce only. But right now there's a case working its way back through the courts challenging the federal government on medical necessity to use marijuana to stay alive. And we look at that case probably to be finished up in the next 2 years. What happened in the states, it said the states have a right to do it, the feds can invade and bust us anyway. But for the most part, unless they got local city governments that want to help them, the feds are not moving in that much. There's been Washington alone because it's illegal to distribute. So all our distribution in the state is illegal. But because it's illegal, it's the state's problem, not the feds' problem. Back when we were busted in '95, we put in our lawyers put in 7 briefs. The 7th one was the one that the judge had been waiting for. He was on our side from very early on. And he didn't want to see us prosecuted. The cops that busted us didn't want to see us prosecuted. There was an editorial written by a right-wing, ultra-conservative columnist in a paper in our area called the New York, Tacoma News Review, that's it. Anyway, he wrote a glowing article, editorial about the work Joanne and I was doing in condemning the DEA. That came out on a Sunday. On that afternoon, the DEA called the local narc task force and gave them 2 orders. Bust us, then prove we aren't who we say we are. By the time we came home from delivering to patients that day, the cops were offering to testify on our behalf, and they were very upset about being put in the middle of this because we were exactly what we said we were in that editorial. We were working as missionaries to the sick and the ailing with something that would really help them, and everybody at that point, even though we didn't have a law, we had a letter from their doctors. In some ways, it was easy to get letters before we had the law because the doctors were mad there wasn't anything. Now, doctors are afraid to sign it like it's a trap, but that's only in a minority. What the judge was holding out for, all 6 of the briefs were good enough to throw out the warrant. He was holding out for the word marijuana. It doesn't appear in the warrant, it's just controlled substances. And he was the same opinion I am. You only control something when you actually have control over it. If it's not controlled, you can't call it controlled substance. Long story short, I've never heard of it before, but we ended up having the warrant thrown out at appeals court level, but sealed. A warrant. Now, I mean, this is not a teenager's record or a rape case. This is a search warrant they made a decision on. They didn't want to take us down because we had all the paper to prove we were who we said we were, what we were doing. We had great letters from the doctors because in those days we gave them an outline and they wrote their letter. Now we have a state form, which works. But the doctors went into great detail on how much they believed in it. And what happened was they broke into our place while we were out delivering. The chief of police wife sat down behind the desk and started reading the statement the patients wrote on the back of their membership letter on why I want to use medical marijuana. What difference would it make in my life? And then she'd follow that by reading the letter from his doctor. And the narcs who were working for the feds but were still state people were in the other room tearing up my equipment. You've heard the stories and how they mutilate everything. I had 6 water lines out of over 200 pieces of water line cut and 2 extension cords. They did steal everything that could be plugged in, except for one pump. It was too much trouble to get it out, so they left it. They just took the cord in. But actually, as the bus goes along, I had minor damage. And the police had the first talk to the local newspaper, and they praised us. Basically condemned what they had done in this case, which is rather interesting.
Wow.
And that was before lead, but it was people like us, I think, so I could push the lead people over, because most cops will tell you, it's easy to bust marijuana people. They're proud of what they're doing, and they don't even think of shooting at you. Now, in that case, you get poison getting in there, they're liable to shoot you, it's dangerous, and there's no money to make. And the cops themselves are beginning to demand that they stop working marijuana and start working the real cases. I'm glad to say in our state.
Do you guys know what LEAP is?
Yeah.
Yes.
I suspect they have a Canadian version of it up here. I believe you would. It's just something you can't stop once it starts rolling. They say 20% is a winning percentage in the United States for overcoming a change. We passed 20% along that, so statewide, number of states that have signed on as medical marijuana, and the number of people in those states added up together are more than 20% of the population of the United States. What the curve is, unless something really extraordinary happens, we're on the way to win. We all are. We just got to stay the course, as they say, and not duck and run. But we are defending ourselves. We did not invade another country and tell them we're doing it for their own good. We're trying to take our own country back from our leaders, both sides of the border. Yeah, I found the real American place in the world, Holland. I really felt like I had all the things I had grown up believing that I should have in America. They were in Holland. My pet peeve, and we all need to work on this, and those of you who are already working on it, I'm glad that I've had some feedback on it, is the term is not other drugs. Herb versus drugs. We do not use a drug. A drug is one compound or a group of compounds. Marijuana is made by God. It's called an herb for that reason instead of a drug. There are 420 compounds that are not easily separated. They can be used in conjunction at whatever levels they are to produce the different types of highs we have from the marijuana or the different medical effects, whichever term works best. Medical effects works best with your relatives.
Yes.
Your neighbors, your doctor. They'll kind of bug some of your friends, but they'll get over it after a while. They will. Something you guys do up here still, but we stopped doing down there is passing the pipe. It's medicine. You don't pass your hay fever medicine around. You don't pass your codeine around. And so we've had statements made in newspaper articles, magazine articles we felt were terribly worthwhile, because one guy was visiting when we were making up signs for the Gay Pride Parade in Seattle. And we were making pro-medical signs up just before we had the law yet. And I think we were collecting signatures at the time. When we were making up these signs, and the guy says, everybody was very businesslike, working hard, making jokes with each other, and making their signs, and occasionally somebody would stop, step back from the group where they were working, take out their pipe, take a few puffs on it, and go back to work, just like somebody else would take it in hand. Now that goes a long ways when you get it in the press, and that's the stuff we work for. We collected in 6 months, it took us to get rid of the search warrant, we collected over 2 hours of clips off the news. And I mean, it might be 18 minutes in one night, 3 minutes on one station, 5 on another, and a little bit over here on CNN. We had 30 minutes coverage of people in Seattle in the local news, and 45 minutes in the national news. No, over an hour in the national news the day the Supreme Court ruling came down. But it was really more than a gift than a punishment, because if it isn't legal to distribute, feds don't really want to mess with your state. The states won't cooperate. They got a pet peeve in California because they made it legal to distribute. And the only thing we lost in arguments on what we wanted in our own version of the law there in Washington was the right to distribute, and they would not give an inch to people with the money. We managed to bend them for everything else, so we left it there. And we've been so grateful since that they were that stiff about it, because they knew what they were talking about. We didn't, but they saw it coming down the line. They wanted us to take Oregon's law. You look up Oregon's law before they just increased it. They couldn't increase it by a petition of the people, but that failed. The legislators turned around and gave it to them anyway. But you look at their law, that's what we were told, take or leave it. We had one advantage over Oregon. Like California, we were organized as patient groups, and we could say we can destroy you if you don't want to work with us. Joanne threatened to go to the press and say this petition is not good for the patients. The Green Cross and other patients don't support it. And one of our enemies took the people with money aside and told her she can do it. You're going to have to work with her. I don't like her either. Doesn't bother me in the least what he said. What gets me is he takes them aside, walks them over right next to where I'm standing, and I hear the whole thing. I don't know whether he connect to or not, because he's no friend of mine. I tried to work with him, but he thought there was something wrong with people that weren't already doctors or gay. And I hate to see prejudice in what it does. But we've had a good time down there, and we've had it because we were willing to risk and willing to take the credit too. And it's surprising. Our district attorney seems to be very supportive of medical marijuana. We've managed to stop many cases, stop several warrants in the procedure of delivering them. It's like we don't know what we can't do, and we won't listen to people that tell us that. At the same time, if they wanted to have, if I agreed to let some people see it grow or something like that, one of them turned out to be a DEA agent, I'd refuse entry with a whole bunch. People in California decided they were going to let the health department in, and they were told there was DEA in this group, and the guy said, I have nothing to hide. Their whole operation went to you know what. And I don't know how many people ended up in jail, but they lost all their grow, they lost their distribution system, and they were working direct coordination with the LA police, and they got in a hell of a lot of trouble. The Seattle police did not work with us, but they don't interfere either. They were there when they threw out the person that we left in charge of the group with the attitude that she was supposed to turn it into a co-op if the people were willing. Well, she brought it about, I'm glad to say. She called the cops on Monday because she couldn't get back into the change of keys. And the police says, well, you say it's a co-op, it must belong to them then. And they escorted her in to use the bathroom. She hung around the whole day, and then they fought over telephones and leases for about 3 weeks, and eventually the patients got control of everything they needed.
And the police came there that day at this person's request, said, we want to keep Green Cross functioning. That's what we're here for. And they made sure that the patients were allowed to keep the co-op and the situation.
The district attorney.
The situation.
The district attorney, when we first knew we were coming to town, we called him up and said how he felt about us operating there. And we already had a reputation because we were in court at the time. We've been on the news a lot. And he didn't seem to be troubled by it. His office didn't. They said, could you bring us something to support what you're doing? We had about 5 inches of double-sided small print literature that we had collected over the years on the subject from all over the world. We took the best inch, I went down and had it duplicated and give a copy of the best inch to the head of the district attorney's office. And he spent the next week reading that, and only that's what he told us. He followed it, finished it a week later, called us up and he said, I had no idea there's that much information out there. And we offered him the other 4 inches. He says, I don't need any more than this inch, this is fine. So, any questions you've heard about the states? I'd love to bust some of the myths or confirm them one so they aren't a myth anymore. Sure.
Why does the IDEA come over here?
The DEA, you mean?
Yeah, that thing.
Now, I understand the alphabet problem. I have it all the time, too. The DEA are, they try to embarrass Canada, insult Canada, kiss up to Canada, so that Canada won't be a place that Americans see as a more freer and honest place. They don't want things like you guys have here in Canada come to our country, like socialized medicine.
We don't have it anymore.
I don't need it to come because I already got it. The veteran system has it. So I make $35,000 a year and I don't have any insurance anymore. But the rest of the people that didn't go to war, which is not a great thing to do, have nothing unless they have a real good job and the employers are constantly shifting the cost onto the people and or dropping the insurance altogether. Yeah.
Yeah, I read that when your president, President Bush, during the time of Hurricane Maria, was away, he was in Switzerland, he was signing an agreement called the COVAX Agreement, which will not only monitor things like cannabis, but all alternative therapies that be under the multinational pharmaceutical umbrella.
They've been trying to get the herbs and vitamins there for years here in the United States. And the doctors don't want to be troubled with it, but once they get it in the hands of the doctors and the drug companies will just get rich off of it.
Of course.
No, they'd like to take a lot of things away in the States, but you've noticed they've extended the Patriot Act. I think it's more like a Priority Act. They've had to extend it twice because they couldn't get support enough to pass it. And they want to lock some things in, and those locks are not coming about. In fact, every day goes by, George, gets weaker and weaker. Whether we can push him away from the this interrogation of our privacy. I mean, some have reported that's going as far as the Greenpeace and the church there in Pennsylvania. Quakers. They have been caught up in that listing list of only people to do with Al Qaeda. Sick Heil.
Well, this is a question. Okay, well, thank you very much, Joanna and Stitch, for coming up and speaking to us and being with us. They'll be here for the whole day. Or actually, no, they have to leave at about 4:20. So if you want to get any more conversation in with these folks, you'll have to get it by then. But again, we will be inviting them back. Okay, we will be inviting them back again next year and the years after. In terms of the schedule, there may be a bit of a hiccup or two. Apparently, Michelle Rainey has been deluged with rain enough in the Lower Mainland that she might be getting her flooded basement ready today instead of coming over. And unfortunately, we haven't heard word yet from Mark Emery, though he should be on his way right now. We do, though, have a few people to help fill the airtime, I guess you could say. On the other hand, it probably would have been quite inappropriate to have Chris Bennett here and not have him speak. And in a few minutes, I'll invite him up and tell you more about Chris. But before that, I thought I would take a few minutes to explain some of the legal issues that we've been dealing with here in Victoria around Hempology 101 and the Cannabis Buyers Club. As I mentioned earlier, I started the CBC 10 years ago and started it when I lived in a van and simply got a pager and pamphlet to begin selling the herb. Shortly after, I got an apartment where I operated for about 5 years before the police actually informed me that I should get a commercial space while they were actually arresting someone else for selling cannabis in the building. And so that was March 2000, I guess, 2001, that we found a store on Johnson Street where we've been able to keep the space for, again, 5 years. However, 9 months into it, we experienced our first legal problem when, after being cut off for reselling cannabis, a member brought the police in to have us shut down. 2 months after that, we were raided by the police. Apparently some of our members were reselling cannabis on the streets. A couple months after that, we were raided because one of our members assaulted someone on the street. The police followed and came in with a warrant the next day to the club. And then about 7 months after that, we had our final police raid, again under the rumor that our members were redistributing cannabis. Now, maybe I should back up a bit, because before we even got a store, I was arrested twice for my activism with Hempology 101. Once at the University of Victoria for sharing cannabis. I was charged with trafficking. And again, 1 week after that, I was arrested at the annual pot giveaway that happens in Victoria on November the 15th. I was originally charged with trafficking marijuana. That was amended to trafficking THC. So before I even got a store, I was actually on bail for these other activities. And it was quite complicated for a while there. Luckily, I wasn't arrested in all of the raids. Going to the club first, we were very successful in court with all 4 trials. 2 of the trials, the charges were thrown out because essentially the Crown Prosecutor and police did such a poor job in court and actually after the arrest that they could not prove the people they had arrested were in fact employees of the club. Now that's despite the fact that people they had arrested generally had keys to the store. Sometimes they were on the board of directors. Sometimes other information was obvious to them that they didn't pick up on. And so we were quite fortunate that they did such a poor job. The other 2 trials, though, were much more important. The 3rd trial, I guess you could say, I was acquitted of selling cannabis to the members of the club for, in some ways, 3 reasons. The courts confirmed that our mandate, that being people with permanent physical disabilities and diseases, was a legitimate mandate consistent with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and that people who had these problems had medical necessity that is protected by the Charter, and so that was confirmed. Secondly, it was recognized that our club had a consistent set of rules and procedures to ensure that it was specifically personal medical use, and that it wasn't being redistributed or it wasn't being used by people that weren't members or otherwise. In fact, being cut off for reselling cannabis to the judge was, or having someone cut off was an obvious sign that profit was not our motivation. And so we were acquitted for that. And finally, that Health Canada was not at the time providing cannabis to sick people, even though they had been required to do so by law. So for those 3 reasons, we were again acquitted of selling cannabis. However, in the final trial for the club, irony occurred when a charge of cannabis resin was put into court, while the charge of trafficking the cannabis was actually dropped by the courts. And the reason that the resin charge was proceeded on was because the medical marijuana access regulations that Health Canada has provided do not allow for cannabis resin. They allow for cannabis marijuana. And according to that law, if someone produces hashish or an oil product or a cookie from their legal cannabis, either provided by the government or that they've grown themselves, well then they've actually manufactured a drug which is different from cannabis and is illegal. Now, this does not make sense for many scientific and legal and medical reasons. And it was very unfortunate that we were surprised with this argument and failed in front of the judge to convince them of its inadequacies. However, I appealed that decision myself and wrote a factum and argued well enough that the Department of Justice decided not to even allow the appeal and to drop the resin charge against me, and therefore having the club be free and clear of all of its charges that were ever Thank you. It does mean a great deal to myself and the other members and growers of the Cannabis Buyers Club. that our services are fully legally protected, at least as much as possible by the court system, even if the government won't recognize our work. And that was definitely the most important thing that's happened to me. Unfortunately, with my other trials, I haven't been so lucky. I was convicted last year for trafficking at the University of Victoria for sharing a few joints. And I recently appealed that decision. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, I was in front of the BC Court of Appeal. And I thought I'd share a few stories about my arguments in front of actually 3 judges. It's the highest level of court in British Columbia that I was in front of. And really, I had my work cut out for me. You may have heard of the David Noel Levine, Randy Kane, Chris Clay case before the Supreme Court of Canada that was decided upon December 23rd, 2003. Essentially, they upheld the constitutionality of the cannabis laws and trafficking laws, striking down the argument that the sort of harm principle, that the law causes more harm than the plant. And while the courts recognize that principle as a valid principle, it's not apparently a fundamental principle of justice. And therefore, the courts said that the government has the right to prohibit anything that they see causes harm to anyone, essentially. And that decision, again, is binding in many ways to the lower courts. And I was arguing for the most part against it, as well as against the, what you could say, arbitrary or discriminatory use of police authority in how I was arrested. When I was arrested, it was not at the 420. They arrested me after in the parking lot when I had shared 5 or 7 joints with other students. In fact, the day of that 420, interestingly enough, someone had donated me a bag with a few samples and a personal note, weighed up to about 7 or so grams of cannabis. One of my arguments to the Court of Appeal was based on some precedent where 2 individuals were arrested sharing a joint in a truck or a vehicle, and the trafficking law did not apply because it was their own personal cannabis and owned by them, and no profit was being made. So I argued at the 420 that in fact it was not my cannabis, that I was a conduit for the students, and that they would give me cannabis and I would roll it up and give it back to them. And essentially it was the groups. And as my friend Colby said, people give me pot and I give pot to people. It's, there's no profit going on except to say that our world would be a better place if we changed these laws. So they didn't buy that argument. I argued for about the first 15 minutes about how I was discriminated against, and after that it was pretty obvious that the courts weren't going to agree with me. But I continued on for another 45 minutes, telling them that essentially the Supreme Court of Canada was wrong and they were wrong if they agreed with it, and that eventually determined people like myself would convince them of their folly. I argued on one hand in terms of the discriminatory effects of the law. The judges said, well, the police have the right to discriminate against you if there's a bunch of people speeding down the road. Just because other people are speeding doesn't stop the police from randomly arresting anyone. And I said that that was true, but in this case it was more like the police going to a weekly speeding event, jumping in their car, speeding down the road with everyone else, and then when it was over, arresting the first person that was leading the charge and letting everybody go speeding every week ever since, as if there's no problem with speeding. That's not the problem. It was that somebody was leading the charge. But they didn't see that as discriminatory either. There were several highlights. It was actually kind of amusing. At one point, the one justice lady was saying that it was an American law, and as long as the Americans were behind it, it would never change, and that I should be a politician in the United States, actually. I shot back, I'm not allowed there anymore, so I got a chuckle, but no resolution. They put off most of my arguments as political, as they often do. The highlight would have to be an argument I made about a statement in the Supreme Court's decision where they said in a very blanket way that if court protection was given to activities like golf and gambling and eating fatty foods and cannabis, that it would make society ungovernable. And I argued quite the contrary, that prohibiting these activities made society more difficult to govern, and that it was not the case that doing these activities made people bad, but that the laws were wrong. The one justice started to agree with me with the gambling issue, and noted that before, when gambling was outright prohibited, that there were gambling dens and lots of problems, and now that the government's legalized it, they're making taxes, it's regulated, and everyone's happy. And so I thanked her for that analogy and said the same would be true of cannabis, and started to point out many of the ways that public peace, and public health, and public order were affected with this law. And then I said further that if the courts don't protect playing golf and eating fatty foods and gambling, then what is the use of having the Charter of Rights and Freedoms? That adults should be allowed to participate in mutually consensual, beneficial acts, and that the law has no place between people when they're engaged in these kinds of activities. And I said further, these other acts that are pointed to here, golf, gambling, and eating fatty foods, all have more potential and real harms than using cannabis does. And at that point, the one judge at the end is, wait a minute here, you're starting to attack what I do in my own personal life. I don't like this way of thinking here. So it kind of was funny how he broke up the train of thought that I was going on. But it was quite, I think, obvious to them that the courts should be providing protection to these kinds of activities. And despite the fact that they upheld the law, I think by the end of that hour, the judges could see the futility behind the cannabis prohibitions, that people such as myself would never give up, would never stop using the plant, would never stop fighting in court when we get caught. And that essentially this law is wasting a lot of people's time. It was very obvious to them. But on a final note, they did actually congratulate me on how well I presented myself at the end. So that was good for me, because it will not be my last time in front of the BC Court of Appeal. My final trial, I was convicted for sharing cookies, convicted of trafficking THC last fall. I actually had a jury trial because I faced a life offense somehow. And we argued, amongst other things, that the industrial hemp regulations allowed for 0.3% THC, and that the cookies contained less than that. They were essentially a legal health hemp product. The government analyst was there, admitting that no tests were done about the percentage of THC in the cookies, or where the source of the THC could have been. But the real victory came in the judge's instructions. He at first quoted the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, which has a zero tolerance for THC, meaning that any amount of THC in your possession could lead you to a possession charge and giving someone THC in any form, or having anything test positive, whether it's dust on the top of a book or anything that has been touched with THC could potentially be trafficking. And the judge told the jury that if THC was in the cookies, then I was guilty. It became apparent with the testimony that, in fact, THC was not absolutely illegal, that there was an allowance in the industrial hemp regulations. We put in a hemp product that had THC in it. And so the judge, when the jury was actually out of the room, admitted that he had made improper instructions in telling them that THC was banned, and that he had to think about what his instructions to them would be. But he didn't change his mind when he gave the final instructions before the jury deliberated. He repeated his statement that cannabis, THC, is prohibited outright, and that if it was present in the cookies, that I was guilty. We are appealing that decision. In fact, the last thing the judge said was that he was looking forward to reading the appeal court's decision about this issue, because the laws do need to be amended. It was very clear that the two laws were inconsistent, And we're really hoping that I'm granting an acquittal by the Court of Appeal while they amend those laws. So that'll probably happen this fall. I have another month to work on my arguments and then give a court date. Hopefully next year at the Cannabis Convention, we'll be talking about all of this as complete history, and we'll be talking about the more exciting things that we're doing in the movement, aside from fighting court and the government. But I imagine we'll be doing that for a few years yet. And just to give you a sense of the history of this fight, because it's nothing new. Some of us talk about fighting for 10, 15, 25 years. This war goes on lifetimes, generations, centuries, millennia. And our next speaker here, Chris Bennett, is the most renowned historian on cannabis and its prohibition in the world. Chris has 2 books, Green Gold, The Tree of Life, Marijuana and Magic and Religion, Sex, Drugs, Violence, and the Bible are the best sources of information on the history of cannabis in the world. He managed Spot TV for Mark Emery for about 4 years. He's done more things than I ever know. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, they call this war a drug war, but really it's a war against nature. And what I mean by that is I point to my friend Steve Cubby, California medical marijuana patient, whose case many of you are familiar with. And Steve's in jail right now for possession of a small piece of peyote and a piece of mushroom stem. So really this is a war against plants, mushrooms, and cacti. And this is a war on humanity's natural, indigenous relationship with the plant world. And I think our right to that plant world is as much a natural right as the right to clean air and clean water.
Yes.
And that's what this is all about. It's no wonder that the same people that are spoiling our water and spoiling our air are the forces behind this drug war, this unnatural war against nature. This right is even greater than any religious right, because religions themselves grew out of this relationship with sacred plants. The earliest form of religion, and probably the first form of religion, and definitely the last form of religion, is shamanism. And the shamanism is based on humanity's experience with the plant world and revelations provided from that. And we could look back to the Vedic religion, the source of the Hindu religion. And we found in the last 15 years in the deserts of Russia, just outside of Iran, in the Karakum Desert, we found an ancient 4,000-year-old Soma temple. And half of this temple, the temple was the size of a football field. Half of this temple was dedicated to the preparation of the Soma beverage. And we now know through this archaeological discovery that this Soma beverage was a preparation of cannabis and ephedra. This is a source of the Vedic religion, and likely also has much to do with the source of the Eden myths that went into Assyria and Babylonia and deeply influenced Judaic culture. As well, and the civilizations of Mesopotamia, we know that they burned cannabis incense in the temples of Assyria and Babylonia. There's cuneiform references to canaba as an ointment and incense throughout that area. And much of my own research shows that even in the main patriarchal religion of today, and I do believe that the source of plant prohibition has a lot to do with Christian concepts of the devil's weed, so this is a deep irony. We find that even in the 30s, people were writing about a Hebrew word, cannabis, that goes back to the ancient text that led to the development of the Old Testament and Torah. And in the first of these references, Exodus 30:23, there's a reference to cannabis. Cannabis, according to Sula Bennett, an etymologist working out of Poland in the 30s, by tracing the modern term cannabis back through history, and then looking at the identical terms for cannabis in Assyria, Babylonia, canaba, this researcher, Sula Bennett, showed that this Hebrew reference was a reference to cannabis. And in the first of these references, God, who appears in flames of fire from within a burning bush, commands Moses to make a holy anointing oil with about 9 pounds of cannabis, myrrh, cinnamon, and some other spices. And every time that Moses is to speak to the Lord on behalf of the Israelites, and none of the other Israelites ever see or hear the Lord in the Old Testament text, it all goes through Moses' experience. Moses is to go inside what is referred to as the tent of the meeting, and he's covered himself in this holy oil. And THC is, of course, fatty soluble in your skin and big organs, so the THC goes through that. As well, some of this holy oil is placed on the altar of incense, and Moses actually speaks to the Lord in the pillar of smoke over the incense altar. In fact, the pillar of smoke in Hebrew is referred to as the Shekinah, and it represents the physical presence of the Lord. When the other Israelites look at the tent and the smoke is coming out of the top of the tent, they know Moses is speaking to the Lord because the presence is in there. So what happens in this scenario is Moses becomes a shaman, and like shamans in South America, Africa, and other countries today, he ingests a psychoactive plant, this time topically and through an incense, and focuses on a problem of the tribe, and from that an answer comes, And this is like the basis of, what happened with the Vedic prophets who came up with the Rig Veda under the influence of Soma, or the Zoroaster, the founder of the Zoroastrian religion, which deeply influenced Christianity in many ways. He as well found his revelation through the drinking of banga. And this is typical. But what happens is, as we move away and culture gets more developed, culture seems to want to move away from shamanic religions and become more focused on things like ethics and rules and laws to govern people by, and less focus on new shamanic revelations from the unconscious. And so when we follow the story of Cannabis, we come to one of the early stories of prohibition, although I'd say that the Eden myth is really one of the first classic stories of plant prohibition. But by the time of Jeremiah, a later prophet who lived centuries after the time of Moses, what had happened is Israel had become a giant kingdom, and there was a focus on how much tithes you should pay to the temple, and all these different rules. And cannabis actually fell out of favor; it was prohibited. And this lasted for some centuries till the early Christian period, when it reemerged again. And it's kind of interesting to note that the term Christian actually makes reference to the same holy anointing oil, which I just described to you. Christ is the Greek word for Messiah, a Hebrew word meaning the anointing. And this makes reference to the same holy anointing oil. And for the first few centuries of the Christian period, pre-Christian period, I guess it's a Roman period really, for first few centuries AD, there was a major controversy between what became the Roman Catholic Church and many other Christian sects now known to us under the term of Gnosticism. And it was largely based around a controversy surrounding this anointing oil. Now, one of the main points of contention between what we know as the Gnostics and what became the Roman Catholic Church has a lot to do with faith versus knowledge. And this, again, relates to shamanism, because in the Catholic Church, you're supposed to just go into the church and put your faith in the priest and believe that they know, have a divine conduit to God, and you don't ever really experience anything except through the church. But in Gnosticism, there was a focus on the development of the individual's experience, spiritual experience. And the Gnostics in their texts wrote there was only water in the baptism, referring to the Catholic baptism ceremony, but there was fire in the anointing oil. And through the anointing oil, we're initiated into unfading bliss. This oil was not only applied for spiritual purposes, but also medical purposes that in many ways are identical with medical applications for cannabis that we're rediscovering today. Medical applications that predate Christianity by millennia, that were written about in the Aryavedic, that were written about in Babylonian and Assyrian sources, that were written about in other ancient sources as well, the Chinese pharmacopoeia. So we're really just rediscovering, just scratching the surface of the power of this plant as a medicine. And eventually all this became prohibited. This is what led to the Dark Ages. The suppression of pagan cults like the cult of Mithras, Ates, Isis, that used psychoactive sacraments like cannabis and magic mushrooms, and a suppression of these Gnostic sects. And even that didn't totally quell our culture, because really, we are an extension of that same culture. This whole suppression lasted into the Dark Ages, and much of the war against the witches, alchemy and stuff like that, was again an attempt to suppress humanity's natural, indigenous relationship with the plant world. And this led to, eventually led to the occult movement, the underground occult movement that happened in the 19th, early 20th centuries. And this same occult movement, through its influence on people like William Burroughs, Allen Ginsberg, led eventually to the beat and what we're facing today. So we're part of an ancient spiritual tradition that's older than any existing religion. All of you, if you're using plants like cannabis for spiritual purposes, if you're getting ideas from sacred mushrooms or other substances, then you're part of that shamanic religion. And that's your birthright. And you have a right to that. And don't let anybody ever try to take that away from you or tell you that's wrong, because what's wrong is this war against plants, mushrooms, and cacti. This war against nature. when I look at what's happening, what's happened just here in Canada, and the rise of the Conservative government, Stephen Harper, all of our worst fear, is now Prime Minister of the country, not because of his popularity, but because the left vote split through a number of parties. The majority of Canadians are more liberated thinking than Stephen Harper. He just got in because his party got the most votes out of about 4 or 5 major parties, right? So it's not like the U.S. where there's just like the 2 parties going. We've kind of, we're in a bad situation, but it's not totally unwinnable. Unfortunately, some of the cabinet positions are definitely going to, majority of them are going to be conservative. So we're going to be faced with a conservative justice minister. And the justice minister can make decisions without going through MPs or cabinet on people's cases. People like Mark Emery, Renee Bourget, my wife, Michelle Rainey, Greg Williams. Anybody with an extradition case is now at the mercy of a conservative justice minister. And that's a damn scary thought, the influence on the conservatives, really that is, again, what I'm talking about here is the rise of the Christian right. We take a look down south of the border to the American Christian Taliban and take a look at what's happening in the United States. You know that in the United States right now, 1 in every 130 people is in prison?
Really?
In Canada, it's about 1 in every 850. So they're imprisoning their population at a 600% increase. More than us in Canada. We're just like, just across the border. And it's not something you're ever hearing about in the media. I'd say a 200% increase would be phenomenal. But a 600% increase, that means people, if we were in the United States right now, people in this room right here would be in jail right now. And a lot of these people that are busted, if your charge is felony, you lose your right to vote, and with how close the vote is in the United States, and the reality that there's like 700,000, 1 million people a year busted for possession of cannabis, and some of those are felony charges, people are losing the right to vote, and the right's getting more and more stacked, And I just don't know how America is going to get out of this situation.
We're always first.
There you go.
Even when it's the worst.
Even when it's the worst, yeah, there you go. And so much of the American focus, definitely is on cannabis. Where they spend the vast amount of their drug money. Take a look at out of all the criminal organizations in Canada, Mark Emery's was the only one that they were investigating. And this is about not just about cannabis smoking, not just about cannabis growing across the border, but also about cultural change that's happening here, a shift of views, and that is what they're really threatened by. It wasn't Mark's seeds, it was pot TV, cannabis culture, and other ideas spreading across the border and giving people information to work with, and people getting educated with facts and coming out and speaking about it. And that's what this is about, And it's really is a religious war, in more ways than one. And right now, if you get busted in the United States, you get a choice between jail and drug treatment. And oftentimes, that's faith-based drug treatment. Because as George Bush says, well, you can put somebody through drug treatment, you may have cured an addict, but you convert somebody to Christianity, you have a changed person, a new person. And this is like the threat of cannabis. Ronald Reagan, he said when he was senator, these young people, they get together, they read books, they smoke marijuana, and they talk. Like these 3 elements were the recipe for disaster. And when his son, Ronald Reagan Jr., was asked about his father's obsession with cannabis, he said, it's not marijuana, the mildly mind-altering substance. It's marijuana, the antithesis of the state. And that's it in a nutshell, They know that at these peace protests against the war, they smell the marijuana smoke. They've been to the environmental rallies and Earth First they've infiltrated, and they've smelled the marijuana smoke. They've been to the sexual rights and liberation of that whole thing, and they've smelled the marijuana smoke. And that is their biggest fear, is that people are going to smoke this weed and watch them on TV and go, wow, you guys are liars. You guys are nuts. You guys are pushing the end of the world on us, and we don't want it, you know what I mean? And that's what this is about. It's much greater than just about our right to medicine or anything like that. It's about our right to this earth, to clean air, to clean water, and the plants that grow on it. It's about our right to life, really, man. And in this coming time here, I wish I could say that the future was bright and I was looking forward to it, but I really feel that this next few years here is going to be a tough time for cannabis. But it's always darkest before the dawn. And in many ways, it's the chains that bind us are those that free us, you know what I mean? And they have made cannabis into this incredibly powerful tool for world change by putting their focus on it. And the more focus they put on it, the more powerful of a symbol it's going to be, and the more powerful will our rise be. So I just want to encourage you all to get out there and get active over this next few years. And don't let them take anybody down to the United States for the use of a plant here in Canada, and stand up for your rights as Canadians and as Earthlings, and stand up for your natural right to the plant world. Thanks a lot, eh?
Thank you very much. And Chris is just going to go now and switch with his wife, Renee, who's with her little child, Shiva. If you've seen a little baby around here, it's a product of Cannabis Love. Renee will be in to follow through on that. Unfortunately, it seems as though Mark Emery may have had better things to do.
That's okay.
I don't know why or what's going on, but
Meh.
we're going to make the most of it anyway. And so we'll invite Renee to come in and speak. And I thought that when she was done, we might just jump straight into our cannabis game show, Reach for the Pot. Well, the reason I'm hesitant to do a puff break because our friends Joanne and Stitch have to leave at 4:20, and the only way we could get them in the game show today is if we played it before 4:20. So I really would like to give Stitch a chance to do that, and then after 4:20 we can all relax and call it a day. So with that, we have Renee Bourget coming here. I'm sort of at a loss for words as to the strength that this woman has in being here and really going through every day. She's amazing. And I guess part of it for me, and I want to say this, is it really hurts me to hear Renee's story and think about it. As I told you earlier, I've been selling cannabis here for 10 years, very publicly in Canada. I'm a free man. I'm not looking to go in jail or let me go for all that, and rightfully so. It really hurts me when I meet another healthy young person essentially doing the very same thing as I am, in some ways much, much less, who's going to be punished so much more. And
Hi, thanks so much. Thank you, Ted, for organizing Hempology. It's an amazing gathering of the tribes, and it's always awesome to come together in cannabis culture, so thanks a lot. Just wanted to talk about, I've been thinking about the war on drugs a lot lately. It's always kind of there's this dark cloud over my head right now just because of my own case, so it's obviously on my mind quite a bit. And it's not a war actually on drugs, it's really a war on plants and mushrooms and cactus, a war on Mother Nature, a war on people and our plant culture, and a war on higher consciousness. And I think that really we need to understand that there's a hidden agenda going on, and that they really wish to commit social genocide on our culture. The same people that are leading the drug war today, it's the same archetypes that started the war on plants, which began during the Inquisition, as many of you know. The war on plants started with the same archetype, which is a small, conservative, right-wing Christian, primarily Christian group of men who want to remain in power, and so they're trying to commit social genocide on our culture and wipe out our culture altogether. And they're doing this through various means. One way is that they're imprisoning our culture. In the United States, there's a cannabis arrest every 30 seconds, which is totally insane. And right now, as I'm speaking, I know that there's many cannabis fields that are being burned down, as well as poppy fields, coca fields, many sacred plants. And cannabis is really an entheogen. And entheogens are plants and herbs and cactus that help us connect with our higher self, or our divine self, or the god or goddess within. And I think that these plants are being targeted because they're spiritual tools that have been used for centuries to put us in touch with the divine. And I think that these tools are a threat to the agenda, those that are supporting the drug war. And I think that another way that they're imprisoning our culture, they are targeting key figures of the cannabis movement. And one of these figures, as you know, is Mark Emery. He's definitely one of the key figures in the cannabis movement here in Canada and worldwide. And I know that the United States government is targeting him and seeking to extradite him and imprison him, I think for life if they get their hands on him, because they know that he was funding a lot of the cannabis activist movement here in Canada and worldwide. And he was doing this through his seed sales. And that's why they took his seed business away from him, and they're seeking to imprison him. Luckily, Mark was able to kind of pull together. He's definitely a magician, and they haven't wiped out Mark's got his magazine going still, and pot television's going still, and the Marijuana Party bookstore, and he's trying to raise money now for his legal defense, but he's getting a lot more attention on his case, which is actually good for the movement. Another key figure that they are targeting now is Steve Covey, and Steve Covey has adrenal cancer. Some of you may be familiar with his case. And he was deported about a week ago, and my prayers are with his family. I'm quite close with them, which kind of makes it emotional for me to talk about them. But yeah, Steve depends on cannabis in order to live, and the doctors that have all checked Steve out have confirmed that cannabis is in fact saving his life. And in fact, there's doctors that want to study Steve because they say it's a miracle that he's lived this long. Because people with adrenal cancer, once they're diagnosed with adrenal cancer, don't live that long. And so Steve's life is a miracle, and I think that's due to cannabis, and that the fact that he uses cannabis, and it keeps his adrenal levels low so that he doesn't have a stroke and die. And right now, thank goddess, while he's been in prison in the United States, they've let him have Marinol, which is great. And Marinol is a synthetic form of THC, and it is helping to keep him alive. But he does need cannabis because it's a more effective medicine for him. Mother Nature is always much more balanced than the pharmaceutical copies of plants. And most pharmaceutical drugs are direct copies of plant alkaloids, and we have to remember that. And I think that's another reason that they're waging war on the plant culture, because these plants are a threat to the pharmaceutical industry. And it's definitely... and also, another way that they are kind of destroying the plant culture is by taking things away like our voting power in the United States. If you're convicted of any drug crimes, you lose your right to vote. You can't vote again, which is totally insane to me. So they're obviously trying to sway the vote. And then you lose things like your right to student loans and things like that. But I really think that, well, I want to also talk about my own case. I don't like talking about my own case because it's been going on for 8 years now, and I really wish that I could just move on and get my freedom and not have to deal with this insane war on drugs on a personal level, but because there's much more things that I'd like to do as an activist that are more on the creative side of things than having to fight against the war on drugs, but they're also targeting the plant culture altogether, not just key figures in the movement, but people like myself. And basically, it started with me in 1997. I was working for a man with cancer and a man with AIDS, and they had a medical cannabis research garden going on in California, and they were recording all their findings in a book that they were writing about medical marijuana. And they hired me to illustrate their book. I had just graduated from college, and it was kind of my first freelance art job that I landed, and I was really stoked, and I was totally proud of it because I had helped vote Proposition 215 into power. And Steve Covey, by the way, he actually helped to co-create Proposition 215, which is the reason that they're targeting him, I believe. Anyway, I helped to vote this law that legalized marijuana for medical purposes in, so I was really excited to learn more about the medical value of cannabis, which is why I took the job in the first place. And I was really proud that I had this job, and like I even told my grandparents about it and was kind of teaching them about medical marijuana, and it was really exciting for me. And then one day the federal authorities came in and ignored the state laws, and they went after my friends, and because I was there, they arrested me and they charged me with all the things that my friends were being charged with, which is conspiracy, cultivation, trafficking, and possession of cannabis. And I was told that if I didn't cooperate with the authorities and agree to testify against my friends, that they would put me in prison for 10 to life. And that's what my friends also faced, is a 10-year mandatory minimum sentence to life. But I refused to cooperate, and I was also imprisoned for 3 days and was strip searched 15 times over the course of 72 hours, sometimes in the presence of male officers who were watching me being strip searched. The women officers just didn't care and had a very cold attitude. I was told to shut up and turn around when I complained about it. I didn't feel safe at all. I was completely shocked to find out that men were prison guards in women's prisons. I didn't know that. So when I got out, I had an amazing lawyer at the time who explained to me what was going on, and 70% of the guards watching women in federal prisons are men, and women are actually raped and tortured, and you can go to any human rights organization website and check out what's going on. It's really dark, much like the Dark Ages, and that's definitely what I would face if I returned to the United States, which is completely terrifying. But even more terrifying for me is the fact that I've got a 3-year-old little boy who I love very much, and his name's Shiva. You guys will all meet him. He's outside playing with the bunnies right now. He's really cute. But his life does not deserve to be ruined because of the drug war, and he would be completely devastated if I was all of a sudden disappeared from his life. And he wouldn't be able to visit me in the United States because I wouldn't trust him going across the border, because they take kids and put them in foster homes and things like that if you have a drug charge in the United States. And my husband wouldn't be able to travel there because he's a well-known cannabis author, so he supports drugs. So he wouldn't even be allowed to cross the border. So that would completely devastate all of us, and I think it's completely unfair. My 2 friends, I should mention, Todd McCormick, he was in prison for 5 years. He was not given the right to bring up medical necessity in court at all, because in federal courts in the United States you can't bring up medical cannabis whatsoever. It's just not accepted in their courts. And he was offered a deal that if he pled guilty to cultivation, he could get 5 years with the right to appeal. So he did that, but he lost his right to appeal in the end, so they totally lied, which they often do in the drug war. And then my friend Peter McWilliams, he used cannabis daily to keep his AIDS medications down, because he had to take a cocktail of AIDS medications on a daily basis so that he wouldn't throw up. He used cannabis as an anti-nauseant, and he died choking on his own vomit because they took his legal right to use cannabis away from him. And that's what was really terrifying for me when Steve left. I actually went to the airport and saw him off, and his wife was crying, and it was really heartbreaking for me because I just didn't want to see another friend killed due to the drug war. And and myself right now, I'm fighting of extradition. The United States wants to extradite me back to a U.S. prison. So I've been here about 7 years, which is wonderful. I love Canada. It's my home, definitely. And I'm going to the Court of Appeals next in March, next month. And if I don't win at that stage, I'll go to the Supreme Court of Canada, which is my last effort. So I'll have about another year left to fight for my freedom here. And the thing is that the United States government doesn't want me to win because they don't want me to set a positive precedent. So if I set a precedent and win here, it will mean that it will make it very difficult for them to extradite Mark Emery, Michelle Rainey, and Greg Williams, the other two implicated with Mark Emery seeds. And they don't want that to happen, so they're fighting really hard to get me back, and they don't want the precedent set. It would also set an international precedent that would help other people in the United States who are being charged with medical cannabis charges. It would mean that cannabis would grant them a safe haven here. And that definitely should happen. I really hope that does happen because the war on drugs is just getting so out of control in the US. 70% of the drug war prisoners are actually cannabis prisoners, which is insane. But I think, on a positive note, I think that we are like a global culture, the plant culture, the cannabis culture, and we're really on fire now. I mean, due to tools like the internet, we're able to get information worldwide, like across to our brothers and sisters around the planet now. And so I think that ultimately we're going to win. And the whole reason that I think that the drug war officials are so threatened by us, the plant culture, is because we're kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum. Like, we're on the creative end of the spectrum, and they're on the destructive end of the spectrum. And I think it's important for us to keep creating, because they're going to keep being destructive and keep destroying. And so I think that, you know, as they imprison our culture, we're going to keep fighting to free our culture and free the plant culture and the prisoners of the drug war. And while they do things like build more prisons, because they're building prisons at an alarming rate in the United States and shutting down schools and turning them into prisons because they can't fill up their prisons fast enough there. While they build more prisons, we'll just continue to build more utopias. And while they build, go and destroy cannabis, gardens and cannabis fields, we'll just continue to plant cannabis seeds. Because these are seeds of consciousness. Every time we plant a cannabis seed, we're planting a seed of consciousness. And we'll spread these seeds around the globe until we overgrow the governments. I think that's what we need. So thanks very much for listening, and hopefully I'll be able to chat with you all later on.
Schedule keeps changing here, and given the amount of time that we have, I've actually reconsidered my earlier decision. We'll be back playing our game Reach for the Pot here at 25 after 3, and we should be done in time for 4:20. So we've got just over, think of it as a 5-minute smoke break.
welcome to the conclusion of our 7th Annual Cannabis Convention here at the University of Victoria. We're trying to have a game show here before 4:20, and we see our friends Joanne and Stitch off. So I think we're just going to jump right to it then, and if I can have our contestants come up to the front. I guess on this side, we'll start with Stitch, Chris Bennett, Remy, who works with us at the club, and Ian, here on this team as well. Good friend and helper of the club. So we don't have a name for this team yet, but we'll come up with one yet, I'm sure. And they're going to play against a group from the club, which includes Ryan, Gord, Anthony, and Gail. So if you guys wanted to step up here, you call yourselves the Green Machine usually, is that right? Gail's the Green Machine, okay. Dragon Ladies, okay, that's good. Thanks, so I'll quickly explain the rules of our game. Some of our contestants have never seen it before, so they need to get it. Okay, so here's the rules, Stitch. So clapping your hands is essentially hitting the buzzer. Okay. I'll ask a question. Each team gets one chance, and it's worth 20 points. If your team can't come up with the answer, or you get it wrong, and both teams get it wrong, then I'll start to try and give out some hints, and it's worth 10 points. Each team gets another shot. You can talk to your teammates to confer before you clap your hands. Each team gets a shot at it for 10 points. If no one gets it, then we go to multiple choice for 5. There's a couple of challenge questions that I'll explain when we get to them, but 8 of the questions are essentially just like what I said to you right there. As soon as you clap, I'm going to come over and get the answer. You can't clap and then talk to your teammates, just so the other team doesn't quit to clap. And most of the other rules, I make them up as we go along. So that's that. So I thought we'd start the game show today with a little bit of history. And not just history about cannabis that we smoke, but cannabis hemp. Something that is vitally important, I think, for the planet, not just for the people on it. And one of the reasons I got involved in this movement was to see that hemp could become legal so that my family could grow it back in Ontario and profit by it, as well as everyone else. And it really upset me to learn about what some call conspiracy behind the prohibition of cannabis in the last century. But I want to talk about some of the potential of cannabis and some of the early potential when it was discovered. Because when you hear about the ancient uses of hemp and the paper that was made, it was all made of the fiber that's on the outside of the plant, not the sort of cork or herds on the inside of the plant. It was only in early this century that we discovered a process to make hemp out of the core or the herds. But even just as importantly just as important as this discovery in the early 1900s was the invention of a machine that could harvest hemp in the field, called a decorticator, that could essentially take the plant and cut it and produce fibers and herds, which is the pith that would create paper. And so for 20 points, who can tell me who invented a new decorticator in 1916? It completely revolutionized the potential of hemp to be processed in the field. Who invented this new decorticator? Okay, Stitch has got a shot.
Whitney?
Pardon?
Whitney?
Whitney. No, I would take a first or last name.
Oh,
but it's
well,
not
I
Whitney.
can't come up with.
No, I said or.
Or.
Yeah, first or last name I would take, but it's not Whitney. You guys have a guess for 20 points at who this person may have been. Okay, no guesses? Okay, I'll start to go for hints, so it's worth 10 points. You guys could jump in when you think. The problem with finding a sort of combine, as you could think of it, for hemp was that the fibers were too strong on the outside, and it was very hard on machines. And so the new decorticator was the first machine that could cut the plant down in the field break it up, and the fibers would be left in excellent shape, and the herds would be left for wood. The first companies that bought this patent and buried it were paper companies, newspaper companies that had just invested heavily in the forestry industry, because it's a lot cheaper to cut down trees and make them into books than it was to pay for farmers to produce a product. And so that's not a lot of hints about the name, but that's some of the history. If nobody, you could clap and take a shot. I'm going to go to multiple choice, so if nobody has a guess, okay. Dewey, no, it was not Dewey. So here's your multiple choice for 5 points. Let's see who gets out of the gate. Was this new decorticator invented by Henry Ford, George Slitskin, Edward Scripps?
Slitskin.
Okay. Damn it. I should have explained more about the multiple choice. So I'll invent a new question maybe to make up for that one. When it comes to the multiple choice, you don't want the other team to know. You want them to guess the wrong answer. So after I say, no, sorry, I should have explained it more. After I say the 4 choices, I'll come over and quietly get one team's answer, and then the other. Yeah, that was George Slitskin. You can tell by Chris's reaction to it. So, pardon? That's our answer. Yeah. Okay, well, I better hurry because I got backup questions. That one there got lost. Okay. So the next one is about a cannabis study. There's been lots of research done on cannabis. When we hear that more research needs to be done, it's not exactly true. But at the same time, it could be done. But there's been lots that's happened already. And one particular study that is worth 20 points right now would be published in 1944. Can anybody tell me what report on cannabis was done in 1944?
The Ledeen Commission.
It was not the Ledeen Commission. No, that was 73. So, Chris, no, you can say here. LaGuardia for 20 points. There it is, Chris. LaGuardia. So, I believe that LaGuardia was the mayor of New York City.
Yeah.
Who commissioned a report on the use of cannabis in the city.
A little flower.
Right on. So, the Dragon Ladies jump out with a quick 20 points there. The next question is a statistic question. It was mentioned earlier that Proposition 215 was passed in California in 1996. Or was it 95? Yeah, it was 95 actually, sorry. Went into effect in 96. Certainly, worldwide would probably be one of the greatest steps forward taken at once by any group of people, that being the state of California. And even though the U.S. government has ignored that proposition or that law for the last 10 years, it is still in existence. Tonight's question for 20 points, a big fat 20 points, is within 2 percentage points. How much did Proposition 215 pass by in the state of California? 56%. Holy cow, this guy studied. So we might not need to have an extra question but we'll see how it goes if the Gale's Green Machine can come back. They've come back before, so the game's not over yet. Tonight's 4th question is about some authors in the movement and activists. Indeed, Steve Covey and Ed Rosenthal have been 2 of the most, at times, prolific activists. Ed has probably about 24 books on cannabis and growing. And Steve, well, his health has certainly kept him from doing as much as he would like, has been for a very long time active in the movement, writing and speaking. And so for 20 points, who can tell me what is the name of the book co-authored by Steve Covey and Ed Rosenthal? That's not exactly it. No, I want the exact name here. So you guys got a shot. 20 points here. What is the name of the book co-written by Steve Covey and Ed Rosenthal? again, as mentioned earlier, Steve Covey is sitting in jail right now in the state of California, where he is spending at least 120 days, if not longer, for possession of small amounts of peyote and mushrooms. I don't think it was mentioned earlier that the charges Steve faces actually originated from a medical cannabis raid, and that those charges of growing cannabis medically were thrown out against Steve, but the more trivial charges did stay. So there you go for 20 points, Gail. What do you think it is?
Marijuana
laws
reconsidered.
Marijuana laws reconsidered. No. That's not it.
Marijuana and law?
Marijuana and no.
That's Steinborn. I think.
Okay, you guys gonna take one more shot at it? Done. No pressure. So we have 10 points here. Okay, Gord, what do you think it is?
Reconsidered?
Dr. Lester Grinspoon will marijuana reconsider. So, for multiple choice, again, if you know the answer, keep it to yourselves so the other team doesn't get to know. Which book of these is written by Steve Covey and Ed Rosenthal? Is it The Closet Cultivator, How to Grow Medical Cannabis, Why Should Marijuana Be Legal, or Why Marijuana Should Be Legal? I'll read the four again so that you can think about it a little bit. Which one of these books did Steve Covey and Ed Rosenthal write? The Closet Cultivator, How to Grow Medical Cannabis, Why Should Marijuana Be Legal, and Why Marijuana Should Be Legal. So if you know in the crowd, actually, you've got to keep it to yourselves. You'll have to play in the game show either next year. I'll get you in next year, Joanna. But I'll get this team's guests first. Let's guess over here. Okay, well I got him on why marijuana should be legal and why should marijuana be legal. Right behind you here. Why marijuana should be legal. You guys got 5 points on that. So we're in the game. So tonight's 5th question is an entertainment question. We love to bring up various subjects of movies and music. And two of the most well-known potheads on the planet have to be Cheech and Chong. Yeah. And we love having Cheech and Chong trivia. Tonight's 5th question for 20 points is name a producer or director of one of these Cheech and Chong films. Nice Dreams, Cheech and Chong's next movie, Still Smoking, Up in Smoke, Corsican Brothers, or Things Are Tough All Over. Does anybody know a director or producer of one of these Cheech and Chong classics? I'm sure they've seen them before.
Yeah, but they were too much into the movie.
Yeah. In fact, this isn't a hint, but Cheech and Chong did come up with the first ever cannabis game show. It was Let's Make a Dope Deal. You may recall the first question was how many ounces do you get out of a lid? And the answer is 1. And for those who are a bit young, a lid is an ounce. But I don't think they really played the game show. Oh, Grammy's going to guess for 20 points. Rob Reiner, no, not Rob Reiner. You got to guess over here. Who is it? 20 points there. Tommy Chong. You got it. In fact, Tommy Chong was the director for Still Smoking, Cheech and Chong's next movie, Nice Dreams, and The Corsican Brothers. So he might just look like a pothead, but he's a pretty good director too, I think. So they're seriously in the game. So
right down to the bottom 10%.
The Dragon Ladies still have a lead with 40 points, but Gail's Green Machine has worked their way back with 25. So we've got a one-question game here, folks. And we're getting to the fun part now. We usually have... I know, I'm getting in trouble. We usually have at this point a smoking contest for 10 points. However, I figured that we were going to do it indoors because I didn't know what the weather was like. And I figured that Mark Emery might be in the game, and I didn't know how many people would be on bail and stuff. So I wasn't quite sure what to do. But today's challenge question for 10 points is going to be a little bit different, but cannabis related nevertheless. I guess I need a couple of books. Oh, maybe just use the table. Okay. So the way this works is each team gets about 7 grams of cannabis, let's say. And the first team that can roll that entire bag into a bunch of these gets 10 points. So, wait, slow down, Chris. The way it works is 4 teams start at the same time. Okay, 1 grinder per team, okay, and 1 set of scissors per team. Okay, and that's it. 1 grinder, 1 set of scissors. If the other 2 want to help, they're going to use their fingers. Okay, so you can use your fingers, but just 1 grinder, 1 set of scissors. Oh, who's got papers? No, just normal puffs. Yeah, no
Oh, what a mess! We're not so bad for our health!
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they got 2 grinders over there. They won't even loan us a grinder.
Yeah.
Okay, now we have grinders.
This game's done in spirit. You can put the pot on the table. Okay, so the pot can be on the table and start. Like I say, 1 pair of scissors, 1 grinder, the other 2 can use their hands. No inch and a quarter, Chris, let's try. Gotta use these normal puffs, yeah. Both teams tried inch and a quarters, that was pretty good. So, now notice I was thinking down, can't we look at? I count to 3, and as soon as I count to 3, it's on. So again, the first team to roll this up into joints with nothing left on the table gets 10 points. And we're going to start tonight's rolling contest in 3, 2, 1, go! So I guess a couple of announcements. For one, I've kept forgetting to remind people of the raffle. We're having a raffle today to pay for some of the various costs associated with this, traveling costs.
You just roll a big bud.
We've got a beautiful
Just know it
glass
has to be burnable. Of course, we want to smoke it later.
and we've got some
Well, yeah.
bowls, a pipe,
That's so
and
awkward.
a t-shirt from Hempology 101. And if you could buy a ticket for $2 a piece, we'll sell some at the end here before we have the raffle. If you want to find out more information about Hempology, we have a webpage at hempology.com where all sorts of interesting information and videos are posted or linked to. Today will be put up on the internet, and a link will be provided to the webpage so your friends can watch the speakers or the show here, whichever it is that they're interested in. And we look forward to having that expand over the next
Awesome.
year. Let's see how we're doing over here. Okay, we've got 3 joints on this table. Not quite all the pots broken up just yet, but Ian's working pretty hard. Just 1 joint on the table over here. 2, that was good, okay. Most of it seems to be broken up. So,
I've never had a play-by-play on a roll.
yeah. Well, you gotta kind of spread all over the table. You gotta clean that up a little bit. Okay, so we got 6 joints over here. Dragon's Lady are working hard. 5 over here by the Annual Cannabis Convention. So, if you want to play Reach for the Pot, we actually play this game show every Wednesday night. We have a meeting downtown Victoria at 7 o'clock. We move them around. We play it right in the front of the Ministry of Health right now. We've got a summer location very close to that downtown, and sometimes move it to other places. But we play this game every week. We've done it for over a year now. And usually we take the first 8 contestants that sign up, and put their hands up and jump in. But some games we prefer to bring in some superstars, you could say, and ask some really tough questions and make them do embarrassing things. So we're just about cleaning up off the table over here.
One more, you guys.
Although Gil's machines are a little bit behind. Yeah, I think we got one left on the, yeah. Holy cow, Remy, the pressure's on to Remy. She can barely take it. Boogity, boogity. Look at those.
Way to go. Hey, these things are going on the table. Hey!
It's off the table.
Let's still going on the table.
Put it in there.
There.
They have crumbs surrounding their joints too.
Look at those
Way,
things, though.
man.
Look
Look
at
at
that.
Yeah, that's
Whatever.
it, Mal. See, it's a half a joint.
Well, hell, I got several half the joints rolled there.
I say we both win.
Whatever.
Not mine.
There wasn't enough left on the table for a joint here. It was just something.
Hey, wait a second, check the grid.
Busted!
But look at this. All right, Travis, put it here.
What?
So who won, Ted?
Yeah, Ted.
Hey, don't think I don't know how to roll. I can like this. Yes, both of those are mine.
Yeah, Ted.
Another one. This is mine too. You want to complain about it?
That was crazy.
Yeah, let's take this out back.
I think after considering all the factors, there really wasn't enough for a joint left here, although Gord's trying to roll something.
Oh, let's get rid of the star.
Hey, we can even let him have this and we still win.
Oh, yeah.
There's 25 points difference.
We can give him 5 points.
Still 5 then.
There's a couple of new guys on the most money, so.
Oh, there's several in there.
I thought these guys were.
Hey, yeah, you can find out by the joints if there's any messed up.
Oh, here.
Oh, no,
I would say that
Does that compare?
there still was on the table. I think that I'm going to give this team the 10 points because there was still enough for a joint left on the table.
Woohoo!
Yeah, because even after you knocked that out, that really wasn't enough for a joint. So I knew it was going to get to the nitty gritty. But we should probably put these away. Oh yeah, 420's coming, so if any of these are for,
We all got the same thing. What are the joints for, eh?
So that certainly brings the game closer. Now, the Dragon Ladies have got 40 points, and Gail's Green Machine has got 35. So it's a very tight race. And we're on to our second challenge question. So we have 2 challenge questions each week that are worth 10 points. And the second one involves a list. Now, what it is I'll give you an example of one that we've done before, but we certainly wouldn't do now, is Mark Emery's seed catalog. That's the team that would write the most number of seeds from his catalog would get 10 points. That's an example. That's not what we're doing now. I thought Mark was going to be in it, so I'd never do that. But what I had thought to do was to give 10 points to the team that could list the most advertisers out of the current issue of High Times magazine. Oh! Something not really read a lot where I come from. And it's a competition from Mark Emery and Chris to a point. So I thought that would be a really interesting challenge, is to see how many people read the propaganda that's spilled out of High Times and know advertisers that are in it. So we're going to work really hard here for 10 points. It's probably going to be a fairly short list that comes out. But this is why sometimes people think I'm mean when I do the game show. But I think it's really important for us to read not just the articles in these various magazines, but read about the different commercial industries and other ventures and people that are involved in the fight to legalize and legitimize cannabis. You can learn a lot. Actually, every time I read a magazine, I'll read it the first time for the articles and the second time for the advertisements to find out, who is in the movement and where people are. And it's really exciting to see. When I started this movement 10 years ago, there was only really 2 stores in town. One is closed, Sacred Herb's still here. But now, up and down Johnson Street, you can buy cannabis, and not just from the Buyers Club in the form of the herb, but there's hemp stores like Pantagruel, I think it's called, or just across from the Sacred Herb that sells hemp. There's Hemp and Company up the street. There's fiber options. I really hope to have my friend Todd from Fiber Options here. If you're interested in hemp, you have to go there, because right now they have pressed boards like plywood made out of hemp chips at Fiber Options. It's the most incredible thing. I was given a board this big and I actually hurt my knee trying to show people that I couldn't break it over my knee. And it was getting really sore actually after a day. It's stronger than wood. It's cheaper to produce a house out of hemp than it is out of steel and concrete, but only if the economy is there. And in France, where there is an economy and they have these facilities, there is at least 15,000 houses right now that people are living in that are made out of these kinds of hemp materials. Unfortunately, it's coming from China right now, because China has developed this market. They don't have trees, so they got to do something. And so these press boards of hemp are coming out of that country. But they could be made here in Canada, very easily. And we just need to see, the investment of I think it's about $250,000 into an industrial plant in Canada that could produce these kinds of hemp boards. And once that initial investment is done, we will have a cheaper, more economic product that's better for the environment than the wood that we're currently using to build our homes with. And so I was really excited to see this hemp board again. It's at Fiber Options on Johnson Street. And really, that's just the tip of the iceberg for all that's new and wonderful in the cannabis movement. And it's great to see all the new magazines that are out there, the new businesses, the new products. It was $25 for a 4x8 before shipping from California. It was about 3/4 inch thick. Yeah, really thick. Like I say, I couldn't break it on.
I'm more into editing than camera.
Oh yeah, what do you edit on?
I use something called AVI Center.
Well, I don't know. They have to make different roofing material. I don't know about roofing material. Yeah, that might be. It's stronger than normal wrestling. Yeah, much stronger. Yeah, it was amazing. They can make 2x4s out of it, plywood. They can mix it with glass to make insulation, and they can make concrete foundations that are 60% concrete, 40% hemp. And the concrete foundations they make are entirely recyclable. So if you want to go tear down your building, you pull it out, you mix it in with a few more chemicals, you form it into a new mold, and there you go. You don't have to throw any of it out. So it's like a permanent fiber once it's been created. So it's really amazing building material. So how are the teams doing here? Oh, you guys are doing pretty good. Yeah, at first I think they were daunted, but the teams have finally caught on and realized they know more about high times than they may like to pronounce in public normally. I think I'll give our teams another 30 seconds here, okay guys? 30 more seconds. Again, I said current, no, the most recent issue, the most recent issue of high times. I bought it for the store a couple days ago, just so you had a chance.
Now where'd you bury it? Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, all the copies are same in town, so we couldn't find out.
My wife would be the one to talk to.
Okay, so TikTok, I hope that was 30 seconds.
Oh, really? That's manifold?
Okay, teams, I'm going to go and look through here. She grabbed the vaccine. Okay. Yeah. It's okay. I took this. Yeah, actually, two men with pipes or two guys with pipes isn't in there anyway, so nice try. Okay, so I'll take our leaders. NORML, National Organization for Reform of Marijuana Laws, yes. Volcano Vaporizer, yes. A hot box, I'm not familiar. I'm not sure if hot box is in here. You'd have to find it. Oh, that one? Okay, I don't think that one's here. Yeah, certainly. That's what we're trying to do. If you can find it, you got it. Diamond Hood Seeds.
No, Diamond Hood. It's a hood company. They make some very interesting aluminum hoods.
Okay. Hoods you mean for the lights?
Shaped like a diamond.
Okay. I don't know about Diamond Hood. I didn't see them in there. It just said seeds. I can't take that. Puffs isn't in there. Quadic. I'm not sure what Quadic is.
Quadic storage.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. Juicy Papers. No. Jack Herrera.
Yeah, he's advertised in there. His book's all over the place in there.
Okay, I don't think, I said though the most recent one, I don't think Jack's in there. I just went through it last night. Well, I didn't.
That's where I was from.
Hey, if you click that, you want the top.
Yeah, no, there's a list of books there. You got FS Books, okay, yeah, I see FS Books there. Amsterdam Seeds, are they in there?
We hope.
I think, yeah, no, are they in there?
He's being picky about it.
Yeah, well, I'm being picky, yeah.
That's what we expect you to.
Decline Seeds isn't in there, I don't think. Advanced Nutrients isn't in there, or General
Well,
Hydroponics.
I did it last time I saw it.
I read it last night. It doesn't have mushroom kits either. So, or Buzz. I'm not sure what Buzz is.
I can't think about it.
Okay, so I think I've gone through your guys and sliced it to hell. But let's see how these guys do over here. Okay. But I needed a name. You can't just say mushroom kits or seeds. Hey, you get on your side here. I tell you, these guys have been worked up about this game for a while. Okay, I better hurry up. The clock's ticking. Happy Vappy, Volcano. Yes, different one. Oddity Pipe. I don't know about. Oh, International Oddities. You have Oddity Pipe now.
Yeah, they don't work. No, we only got 4 of those.
It's a lot. I don't know if it would have to be International Oddities. They don't advertise it, no.
They don't anymore?
No. Jack Herrera Seeds. I think there's a Jack Herrera Seed, but I don't think there's a seed company. Yeah, I'm trying. Pure Hemp isn't there. Trojan. Normal is. Prototype I don't think is there. Herbal Detox. They have to catch a cab to go back to the United States. So, Bamboo Papers I don't think advertises in there. High Times does. Okay, I've done the best count I can, and as far as I can tell, you guys have 5, you guys have 4, so you beat it. Actually, at this point, Ian, I'm afraid to say that they've got a 5-point lead. There's 3 questions left, and possibly a makeup question, because the first one didn't go very well. But right now, Gail's Green Machine has 45 points, and the Dragon Ladies have 40. The pressure's on. Now, I forgot this publication here. Unfortunately, I left it at my apartment, so I don't have it here to prove. But I know that this is a fact, that in 1998, in June 1998, an organization published a piece of work that said that 8% of world trade was in illegal drugs. What organization published this statement in June 1998? It was not Forbes.
I figured that playing had it covered.
Okay, for a big fat 120 points at this state of the game, Ryan thinks he knows. Cannabis Health. No, it was not Cannabis Health. Oh, Chris is jumping in for 10 points. It was not the UN, no. Good guess. You guys got one last quick guess here for 10 points? You got no, you guys have to go to multiple choice now. If you get it, they don't get it right. So, what organization said in June '98 that 8% of world trade was in illegal drugs? And you can't get your answer from your friend, Gord. If you're in the audience calling Gord right now, that's not fair. Guys, gonna take a shot. If you clap, then I'll take the answer. Okay, it was not normal. No. So I gotta trudge on through. We're to multiple choice. So was this statement published by the Cato Institute, the World Bank, the DEA, or the Fraser Institute? Which one of these four, and keep it to yourselves, I'll repeat them once. Was it the Cato Institute, the UN, the DEA, or the Fraser Institute that said that 8% of world trade was in illegal drugs? I'll get the leaders' answer. Oh, they don't think that. Okay, guys. Which institution, which organization was it? Okay, the pressure's on over here. You got a 5-point lead, so it's okay. The Cato Institute, the World Bank, the DEA, or the Fraser Institute? Okay. Oh boy, they both got it right there. It was the Fraser Institute from Simon Fraser University. So you guys got lucky there with that. Chris remembered that, I think. So 5 points to each team, and the pressure builds. A lot of people have lost many friends in this movement, as we heard Renee earlier, and sometimes people in the movement have lost family as well. For 20 points, can anyone tell me what activist lost a son to cancer at the age of 14? What cannabis activist lost a son to cancer at 14? Who was it? Dr. Lester Grinspoon, you got him there, Chris. In 1971, Dr. Grinspoon lost his son Danny at the age of 14 to cancer. And at the end, in the last year of his life, the good doctor was able to find the cannabis that his son used to alleviate the nausea, and really helped with the last year of his life, and has been instrumental in Dr. Grinspoon's advocacy over the last 35 years, really longer than I've been alive. Just about this man's been helping to free this herb, and Chris deserves the 20 points, and Dr. Grinspoon deserves a big fat kiss. Anyway, we've got a 15-point difference now, with the Dragon Ladies ahead and time ticking on. So here we go with tonight's second last question. And again, I forgot some of my stuff at home. I'm sorry about this. I had this here to prove that I'm not making it up, but I'm going to have to use this question. I've got 2 Price is Right questions for the end of the game. You're allowed, when you take a guess, I'll give you, in this case, it's plus or minus 25 cents. And I'll name a product in the store, and you try and tell me how much it would cost. The first one is a bit of history here. I thought for some crazy reason to use High Times for a couple questions. And so within 25 cents, how much did a High Times magazine cost in March 1979? There's 20 points. Oh, Gail's guessing first. How much? $4.50. No, it was not $4.50. So, what'd you guess over here, guys? $1.25. It was between $1.25 and $4.50. So no, you didn't get it there. It's down to 10 points now. It was between $1.25 or $1.50, obviously, with the sort of plus minus. And Anthony's going for it. What do you think? $2.95. No, it was not $2.95. So you guys got a quick guess here. You've got a lead of 15 points. This will make the game. What's your guess? 175. 175?
That doesn't cover 195, which I think is what it is.
Well, it covers $2, which is what it is. So yeah, you got it there, Stitch. Right on. Congratulations. Now I got time, even though the Dragon Ladies won and I'm giving out my prizes, I got one last question that I'm just going to squeeze in, just because I can. Uh-oh, I'm ripping this up. This is a handmade hemp washcloth made in Nepal. Within 25 cents, how much does this cost at the Still Eagle in Nelson, BC? Handmade hemp washcloth from Nepal. I bought it last summer. I've been waiting since last summer to do this, folks. So Gail's going to take a guess. Within 25 cents, how much, Gail? Yeah. 475. No, it was not 475. You guys got a guess over here? $8.20. No, it was not $8.20. It was less than $4.75 or less than $4.50. To tell you the truth, it's hard to believe how inexpensive this is. Actually, last year. Anybody gonna take a guess? At the point? How much? $3.50. No, I'm afraid not.
Not gonna work.
Is that gonna be your last guess over here? Chris Clapp, my producer, makes me get this. $2. No, it was not $2. So, yeah, I'm just trying to come up with some multiple choice questions. Okay. Fair enough. Thank you so much for playing. Thank you so much for coming, Stitch. Very awesome. We'll see you next year, guys. Okay, I guess bye, Joanna. You're going to do it too? In fact, we might just skip the multiple choice. These guys have already won. The price for the hemp cloth, by the way, $2.50 for a hand wash hemp cloth from Nepal. One of the best prices I've ever seen. So, thank you very much to all our contestants. Okay, somebody's got to get Stitch's prizes here. Anthony, can you earn up Stitch's prizes? Okay, thanks. He's got long legs. So, thanks, guys. So tonight's winning team gets a variety of little prizes here. We've got a T-shirt for everybody. Medical Cannabis is not a kind of T-shirts. If you need a different size, we got more different sizes there. Pack of papers, because you can just never have too many papers. And we have here some of our marijuana saw from the Cannabis Buyers Club. It's more like a first aid saw. It's not going to help you with anything terminal, but it's really great for a variety of skin conditions. Actually, it helps with skin cancer, so I can't even say that. But it's really good for cuts and burns. And I don't know if you ran out of your last jar, Chris, that I gave you, but there's some more. And there you guys go too. And finally, from Walbrand Steve, who's up there at the door, who's been helping out the front, coming down with our raffle stuff. Yeah, come on down, Steve. Steve is an amazing artist who lived in the Walbrand for 7 years. No, I think it was more 7. He's corrected me on that. But at the time he was there, he made about 25, I think, original pieces of art reflecting various places in the Walbrand Valley where he lived. And so we have for each of the winning team one of Walbrand Steve's postcards. So thank you so much everybody for playing. And you guys all get your packet papers here too. We'll get that to them. One last call for raffle tickets. Anybody still into buying a raffle ticket here before we get her going? $2 a piece, 3 for $5. Always cover the costs. Traveling and all that stuff. Last call for raffle tickets. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, allow me to say, I was told that
about the U.S. blockades on Cuba. Just here at UVic, Janine was just telling me about it. 7 o'clock. At 7 o'clock?
I just know we fight this war, but it's really Mother Nature and everything.
It is, yeah. And women too are connected to nature, so it's inevitably it's a war on men and women, but
and the women are being,
especially,
not taken care of, not treated well. So I bet you and I maybe have the best husbands in town. It's such a
Hi, Marty.
Oh, you did
Well, it's his fault for being late. Now, Ryan, make sure everyone signed a waiver.
You only need to do that if you're going to make profit.
I'm sure you got some good stuff. How was it picking up the last time?
Yeah, it's Friday. Okay, cool.
No, we all know the purpose of the joint voting campaign.
Sure you
we're just
do.
like
We'll just pass it to her after.
the joint like right here.
This is Stacy.
Oops.
Not too bad I didn't have any of that stage GBA.
You just pick a joint and follow it around.
Yeah, pick one joint. I don't know.
Course and maintenance.
Non, mais ouais, mais il y en a beaucoup qui guettent là-dedans aussi. Ouais, comme le dernier.
Yeah, or no, you can just walk to the circle.
Non, pas encore.
There's a bus stop about right there. You might want to walk to there. Maybe you can catch different ones, right?
Yeah, there, pick this one. It's just lighting up, man.
Okay, I'll get to it.
This guy works at the library. It's so fun smoking weed on campus. And I get to see all like the people that I've been class with.
There you go.
It's great. Like this one kid that I just got into, I do all my labs with him. And he's just stab and blazing.
Est-ce qu'il y a des joints, là?
A little too hard. I'm like, yeah.
This is perfect light with the overcast.
Oh, that looks really good, man.
No shadows to worry about.
Yeah, it's good lighting, right?
Photographically, yeah.
That's a really nice bowl, man. Quel autre gars?
Le gars avec le chapeau?
Il a peut-être juste enlevé son chapeau aussi.
Il a juste allumé des gens et collé son nez.
Ah, il fait souvent ça, mais il peut pas rester ici, il veut pas faire il a donné des joints, il est correct.
Ouais, il a donné un 2 sets.
Ouais, mais plus que ça aussi, d'autres personnes qui avaient des joints. Le père qui est ici, ben, il est terrible. Ah, il est